ओम स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last reading class, we stopped at para number 4 after reading half of it. Therefore, we shall continue today from the very beginning of that paragraph, number 4, and from the same page, 326. Although the master was almost holy and illiterate as that word is ordinarily understood, a study of his life reveals how he maintained the authority of the scriptures all his life. The methods he undertook through the pure impulse of his heart, even before he was initiated by any spiritual teacher, were all in accordance with the scriptures and never contradicted them. These events of his life prove the fact that this will happen to all who are eager to realize God with a pure and holy heart, where there is no swindling in the mind. That is an expression by Sri Ramakrishna. There should be no theft inside our mind. That means there should be no hypocrisy. We must be sincere to the core. If we are sincere, then all our faults also will be excused by God, and we will have the right direction shown to us in our spiritual life. And there is nothing to underrate this, for a little thinking will show that the scriptures have been compiled out of such experiences. What we call as Shastras, the scriptures, are nothing but record of the spiritual experiences of different sages and seers, the rishis and munis. So when they have realized that one, they have uttered that their experience, and it has been recorded, and that is considered as a standard. So for the next generation and the next generation, we always refer to our spiritual experiences to what has been experienced earlier. So if it tallies with that one, we can be doubly sure that our realization or visions or knowledge in the spiritual field is correct. There must be something to connect, compare, and then say that something is right or wrong. So in the spiritual experiences, where can we compare our experiences? You don't get spiritual people anywhere and everywhere. So your guru who has instructed you may not be in his body. He might have left. Even if you were there, perhaps your experiences may be something which he has not experienced. He must have had his own experience of spirituality. You may have something new. So how to corroborate that your experience is correct? Therefore, it is said that whatever the experience of the spiritual seekers must coincide or must accord with the Shastras, the scriptures. Scriptures are nothing but the experiences of the past aspirants in spirituality who have reached the heights of spirituality and have recorded their experiences. So, the books that are called the Shastras are nothing but the records of these experiences of hearts like that of the Master, the results of their efforts for the realization of truth. Therefore, the truth of the Shastras has been clearly proved by his extraordinary life, inasmuch as the experiences recorded in them have been realized by the unlettered Master exactly as they are depicted. This is Sri Ramakrishna could refer to the previous experiences and get assurance from them that his experiences are correct. At the same time, the Shastras who have become old So people might lose, oh, it has been written some 2000 years back or 3000 years back. How can we rely? It has been again re-established. Their truths have been rediscovered. And it is, we see in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. So he has achieved a double purpose there. Therefore, the truth of the Shastras has been clearly proved by his extraordinary life. So, the master exactly as they are depicted. Swami Vivekananda pointed this out and said the reason of the master's incarnation this time is as an unlettered person is to prove the states and experiences recorded in the Shastras to be true. The Shastras have been written long, long ago. Somebody may get doubt. It is at that time, if you people have experienced, whether it stands good today in the modern times. So Sri Ramakrishna has validated their correctness by experiencing himself the same experiences they had thousands of years back. So Swamiji said, he did not go to any book or anything, unlettered. He went on the practical practice of what is to be done to purify the mind, to get the spiritual experiences. So he got the same experiences as the Rishis and Munis, who had also done the same thing. They never went to universities or colleges, but they practiced what their gurus told as practical steps to realize God. And they did it, they got experiences. So same was true with Sri Ramakrishna, and the author says it will be true with every one of us. Suppose we don't get a guru, suppose we are sincere and we sincerely call on God in our own way. It will not be our own way. For such a sincere person, God guides from inside our heart. So, if we practice it sincerely, then our practice also will be in accordance with the Shastra. Because the sincerity is the one thing that is loved by God. So if there is sincerity, He will help you to be in the right way always. As examples of the masters maintaining instinctively the authority of the scriptures, we may mention here the different dresses he put on, one after another, under the impulse of different moods of Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Mathura, etc. The seers have said through the Upanishads that one cannot attain perfection by tapas only without putting on external emblems. So, Mundaka Upanishad says, and so this Mundaka Upanishad says, we must have the proper external environment also, or we must have proper dress and demeanor to rise to higher levels in spirituality. What we call as achara, the traditional customs are to be followed, so that your purity of the mind and steadiness of the mind increases, so that you will become fit for higher expressions of spirituality. So Upanishad that one cannot attain perfection by tapas only without putting on external emblems. It is seen in the life of Master also that impelled by his own heart, he put on the dress and other external emblems favorable to the practices of whatever spiritual mood he undertook at any time. This is something, extension of the common rule we see. Suppose somebody is a householder. He put on the dress of a householder. And suppose somebody becomes a monk from out of them. The householder himself, say, he takes to monasticism. He will discard this dress and put on the ochre robe of a sannyasi. See, to become a sannyasi, you have to don that ochre robe. And when you are a householder dress is different from a monk's. So this help himself and the society also in holding on to a particular level of culture. Then, so he put on the dress. So the extension of the rule of sannyas in putting on the ochre robe is to all the other dresses he is going to wear. For different dresses, for practicing Dasya Bhava of Hanuman, he tied a cloth like a tail, and then he used to have a stick with him in place of the mace that Hanuman used to carry. These are all the external emblems for a Dasya Bhakti practice. Similarly, he puts on the sari, put on the women dress, and then he also puts on the ornaments, etc., like women. That helps him in impressing upon his own mind that he is playing the role, practicing the role of a woman devotee. So this external dress helps. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna has proved and showed to us in the modern age also. These have a significance. For instance, he wore red cloth, ashes, vermilion, and rudraksha beads in order to attain success in practicing the filial moods towards God. The mother described in the Tantras. So he used to put on all this mother's attire. So, and then he used to put on the mother's dress and the rudraksha beads, etc. And the master described in the Tantras, at the time of the practices according to the devotional moods spoken of in the Vaishnava books, he donned the well-known traditional bhek and adorned his body with white cloth, white sandal paste, garlands of beads made of the holy basi, etc. Desiring to realize the non-dual mood taught by Vedanta, he put on ochre dress and gave up his sacred thread and the tuft of hair on the crown of his head, and so on. So these are all traditional marks, external marks for practicing a particular sadhana. For Vedantic sadhana, you have to put on an ochre robe, etc. Some you have to practice some mood of the 5 moods of Shanta Dasya. According to that, you have to put on your dress. It becomes easier. Again, just as he assumed various male forms of dress at the time of practicing the male moods, so he did not hesitate to adorn himself with the female forms of dress and ornaments while practicing the female moods. The master taught us many a time that one could not realize God till one gave up the 8 ties of shame, hatred, fear, and the egotism due to birth, family, good conduct, etc., which accompanied one from life to life. So, it is a very high level of spiritual life where you want to transform your very personality from male to female or female to male. Whole personality becomes changed mentally, and after the mental change, the physical changes also occur to a great extent. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna experienced and taught also. How far he himself followed the teaching in body, mind and speech, all life can clearly be understood by a careful study of all his actions, including the wearing of dress, ornaments, etc. at the time of the sadhana. Engaged in the practices of Madhura Bhava, the master became anxious to use clothes and ornaments proper to a woman, because Madhura Bhava was practiced by the Gopikas and Radhika. Therefore, he thought if you cultivate that mood, of Madhura Bhava, one has to wear the woman's dress and other ornaments, etc. included. Knowing the desire of his, the greatly devout Mathur had the pleasure of adorning him now with a precious sari, now with a skirt, a gauze scarf and a bodice. Desirous of making his female mode of dress perfect in all respects, Mathur decked him with a head of artificial hair. Yes, with a head with artificial hair and a set of gold ornaments. That gift of Mathur, we knew from a reliable source, gave evil-minded people an opportunity to calumniate the master's austere renunciation. But he and Mathur did not pay any attention whatever to that censorious talk and proceeded towards their goal. Sri Ramakrishna has already told you should never be, you feel sort of a shyness to put on a female dress. He said all this shame, this shyness, etc. must be given up if you want to pursue your goal to the ultimate realization. Mathur was highly delighted in the satisfaction of father, since he knew that he was not doing it all in vain. Adorned in such dress and ornaments, the master gradually merged so much in the mood of women of Vraja, women of Vraja, the Gopikas, ever desirous to have the love of Krishna, that the consciousness that he was a male person disappeared altogether, and every thought, word or movement of his became womanly. So the master began to act like a woman. The master, we are told by himself, was thus in a woman's dress for 6 months, in the faith that he was the spiritual consort of God. All the actions of the master became womanly. We have mentioned elsewhere the extraordinary coexistence in the master of both manly and womanly temperaments. Is it therefore to be wondered at that, under the influence of the womanly dress, the temperament of the fair sex should be roused in him? So naturally to him to behave like a woman when he put on the dress of a woman. But nobody could ever imagine that under the urge of that mood, his movements, speech, smile, glance, gestures, and other actions of body and mind would become completely womanly. But what all this did take place, however impossible it may appear, was born out both by Hriday and the master himself. When frequenting Dakshineshwar, we saw him mimicking sometimes women's manners. We could see all these things. These mimicries used to be so highly natural and perfect that even ladies were astonished to see them. So much was the impression that would create in him when he took up such a dress and would try to feel that he is a woman. The master's behavior. At that time, the master sometimes went to the Jan Bazar house of Rani Rasmani and lived there in association with the ladies in the inner apartments. Those ladies already knew quite well his pure character, free from the slightest tinge of lust, and looked upon him as a god. Besides, they were not so much charmed by his womanly deportment and his genuine care and affection for them that they regarded him as one of themselves and could not at all maintain their bearing of bashfulness, hesitation, etc. in his presence. They also felt that he was a woman himself. He was no more a man there. When the husband of any one of Mathur's daughters came to the Jan Bazar house at that time, the master, we have heard it from himself, adorned her with attire and ornaments, dressed her hair, took her by the hand like a woman friend, teaching her various ways of entertaining her husband and making her sit beside her husband, returned from the room. He said, conscious that I was a woman, friend of theirs, they also did not at all feel uneasy. Something very extraordinary. Only we see such an incident in the case of Arjuna, when they were in the exile in the forest. So he would behave like a woman teacher for the princess. So he was called Brihannala. It is in the Mahabharata. So he behaved exactly like a woman. So nobody knew that it was Arjuna. So Arjuna had transformed himself. There it is said that by the grace or perhaps by the curse of some divine force, he got converted into a woman. That is how it is mentioned there. So a man becoming a woman, we see there. Here it was self-created womanliness that the master has done. Such powerful mind, that mind can change the body itself. So the master himself says, the women did not feel shy before me, thinking that I am also a woman with them. While he was in a woman's dress, it was difficult to distinguish him. When he remained thus surrounded by ladies, Hriday said, it was difficult even for his very close relatives to recognize him quickly. One day at that time, Mathur Babu took me to the inner apartment and asked, can you say which of these is your uncle? Mathur Babu asked Hriday, who is Sri Ramakrishna? Can I recognize among these people here? He is now mixed up with other ladies with this tofen or with his artificial hair on his head. So he just looks like any other woman. Can you say of which of these is your uncle? Although I had lived with him for so long a time and had served him daily, maybe 20 years, I could not at once distinguish him from them. His own, such a dear helper and relative friend. So he himself could not recognize him as Sri Ramakrishna when he was in the female dress and was mixed up with the other women. When during that period of his life at Dakshineshwar, uncle used to pluck and collect flowers in the garden early in the morning, every day with a flower basket in his hand, we carefully observed him and noticed that every time he started walking, his left leg moved first, like that of a woman. The Bhairavi Brahmani used to say, I mistook him very often for Sri Radharani when I saw him plucking flowers in that manner. So everyone corroborates that the person himself had changed into a woman by just auto-suggestion. I am the Gopika, I am a consort of Krishna, and he became that one. Having plucked flowers and made variegated garlands of them, he then used to adore Radha Govinda every day, and having sometimes adorned the Mother of the universe also that way, he prayed imploringly to her, as did the gopis of Braja, to Katyayani, to let him have Krishna for his husband. So he exactly became like a gopi of the Braja, of Vrindavan. Desirous of having the vision of Krishna and of getting him as a spiritual husband, the master now performed the service and worship of the Divine Mother He then engaged himself in the service of the holy feet of Krishna with an undivided mind and spent his days in eager prayer and longing. That eager prayer in his heart never ceased at any time, neither during the day nor during the night. Days and months passed by, but despair or lack of faith never came to remove him an inch from that longing. So he was so steadfast. That prayer became gradually converted into copious weeping, and that longing into restlessness and anxious pining away for the beloved, and a sort of madness, making him give up food, sleep, etc. And how shall we describe the pangs of separation? Viraha Vyata, as the poets call it. That unbounded yearning for the complete union for all times, without a break, with one's darling of the heart, now cruelly obstructed by manifold barriers, yearning that churns one's heart's blood, plays havoc with one's mind, and devastates one's body and the sense organs. How shall we describe the pangs produced by such a yearning? Why they did not cease by simply manifesting themselves as agonizing mental modes, but also brought about again that unbearable burning pain and intense heat which he had felt all over his body during the early stages of his sadhana. We have heard from the Master himself that drops of blood oozed out then at times from every pore of his body under the powerful sense of the separation from Krishna. All the points of the joints of the body seemed slackened or almost dislocated. The senses completely desisted from functioning, and the body lay motionless and unconscious sometimes, like that of a dead man, all because of the extreme anguish of the heart. It is in the case of Radharani also, out of her separation from Sri Krishna, she would get into all such moods. She would not be able to move. She would be lying down as if half dead. A contrast between the Master's transcendental love and that conceived by us. We, men, eternally identified with the body and conscious of being that alone, understand by love the attraction of one body for another. Or if we go as the result of strenuous effort, just a little beyond the consciousness of the gross body, and regard love as the attraction towards the aggregate of the noble qualities manifested in a particular body. We call it by the name of transcendental love and sing hallelujah over it. But it does not take one long to understand that this, our so-called transcendental love, eulogized by generations of poets, is not free from the consciousness of the gross body and subtle desires for enjoyment. Ah, how worthless, insignificant, and hollow that love appears in contrast with the true transcendental love manifested in the Master's life. So the author compares the physical love which we usually see and the divine love, divine Madhura Bhava love experienced by the Master. So there can be no comparison at all. This is always concerned with the body only. So even in our so-called poetic love, so it's only words we say, but we never feel those words in our feelings in the depth of our heart. So the author compares these two and says it can never be compared with that divine love of the Master. What the devotional scriptures say. Srimati Radharani alone, the devotional scriptures say, realize the ultimate limit of the aforesaid transcendental love in her life and left us perfect ideal to the world. So these Shastras record, the Vaishnava Shastras, they record the condition of Radha at every stage of her progress in her love to Krishna. So if one reads it, one can find how Radha had developed a high level of love to Krishna. Nowhere in the whole range of devotional scriptures is to be found a peer for her. So her depth of her love for Krishna can never be equaled by anyone. Who completely oblivious of bodily and mental comforts could give up shame, hatred and fear without caring in the least for social or popular opinion, and could trample upon the prestige due to birth, family, good contact and respectable position. All these are followed by ordinary men and women. So they are restricted. But here was the case of Radha, who overcame all these restrictions. So that expression of her love was so spontaneous, so it can be compared with no other love of the humankind. In order to define good conduct and respectful position, in order to feel happy in Krishna's happiness alone, so she gave up everything for the happiness of Krishna, to make Sri Krishna feel happy. Therefore, nobody in the world, the Shastras say, can have even a partial experience of that love. For the whole experience, they say, is not possible for jivas at all, and have the vision of Krishna. But by the grace of Radha, for Krishna, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, is eternally captivated by her love, which is devoid of the slightest tinge of lust and fulfills the desires of devotees at her instance. So, nobody can develop their love to Krishna to the highest level to which Radha developed. Then how can the ordinary souls realize Krishna? They propitiate Radharani. Radharani being a woman, being a mother, so she has got that motherly love towards the whole world. So she confers her compassion on the seekers, and through her compassion, Krishna also confers his compassion on the aspirants. So aspirants can have the vision of Krishna. So vision of Krishna is made easy by the compassion of Radha. And to please Radha, whatever is to be done, if we could do it, that will be the easiest way to have a vision of Krishna. The implication of the devotional scriptures referred to above is thus clearly brought out that until one realizes the kind of love experienced by Srimati, it is Radha, the embodiment of transcendental love, one cannot have God as husband and feel the perfect sweetness of love. Sri Gauranga came to exemplify the transcendent love of Radha. Although the extraordinary glory of the love of Radharani for Krishna has been highly eulogized by Shukadeva, the chief of the Paramahamsas and other self-controlled sages who are supreme as the very embodiment of, so to say, of freedom from Maya. The generality of the people of India did not know for a very long time how to realize it in life. in order to make people understand how to realize it. The Divine Lord, the Vaishnava teachers say, had to incarnate himself with Srimati in one and the same body and receptacle as Krishna inside and Radha outside. In that extraordinary embodiment of his, which is known as Gauranga, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So the Sri Krishna Chaitanya Bengal, Gauranga, is called Gauranga. So he was inside Krishna, outside Radha. So he had the love of Radharani and also the love of Sri Krishna, both in himself. Thus Gauranga came on earth to do good to humanity by teaching the extramarital relation of love in the spiritual domain with God as the lover. So if somebody wants to practice the spiritual discipline according to the Madhura Bhava, so then he has to practice as the Radharani. So how should he do it practically? All the steps have been shown by Gauranga. So Gauranga's life, if one reads, so one can get clue to how one can go step by step towards the highest love, which would get the vision of Krishna. All the signs that were manifested in Radharani's body on account of her love for Krishna also manifested themselves in Gauranga's body, though male, owing to the power of his love for God. So Gauranga was a sannyasin and young and very, very beautiful, and nobody could imagine he would become a monk. But he became a monk of the highest order, and he exhibited all the signs of the Madhura Bhava in his body, which were there on the body of Radharani. So that is why he is called as both the Radharani and Krishna in one body. They asserted that Gauranga was Srimati because they saw the manifestation of all the signs of devotion in his body and mind produced by the Madhura Bhava. So Sri Gauranga is the second example of that ideal of transcendental love. The first was Sri Ramakrishna. Though he was having a male body, he practiced as a woman, as a gopika, as a helper of Radharani, and developed the transcendental love and had a vision of Krishna. Another example is Gauranga. The master meditated on Radha and had a vision. Thus, understanding that the attainment to the vision of Krishna was impossible without Radha's grace, the master now applied himself thoroughly to gaining her favor. Lost in the remembrance and reflection of her form, the very embodiment of love, he incessantly offered at her lotus feet the ardent emotions of his heart. Consequently, he was very soon blessed with the vision of the holy form of Radha. So he worshipped Radha so that through her he can get the grace of Krishna and his vision. So when he started worshipping, then he had a vision of Radha. Devoid of the slightest tinge of lust, he now saw that this form also disappeared into his own body, like the forms of other deities when he had their visions. She appeared and she disappeared in his own body. Is it ever possible, said the master, to describe the glory and sweetness of that incomparable, pure, bright form of Radha, who renounced her all for the love of Krishna? The splendor of her beauty was bright yellow, like the pollens of Nagakesara flowers. Nagakesara flowers have got a yellow pollen. So he compares that one to to Nagakesara. So this is how experience after experience comes to him in the Madhura Bhava also. And he was an extraordinary person. Perhaps next example after of him, of this Madhura Bhava, perfect Madhura Bhava, is Gauranga, the Krishna Chaitanya. So these two great stalwarts brought back to the humanity the great path of Madhura Bhava, the mode or the mood of loving God as one's husband. And they have shown also that it is possible to attain God through this path, whether one is a woman or a man. Because if she is a woman, it is very natural to consider God as her husband and practice, like Radharani. But Krishna also had the equal love, that is also transcendental love. Therefore, if one has a body like Krishna, a male body, then one can practice this Madhura Bhava also, and he can also develop transcendental love and have the vision of Krishna as well as Radha. So Sri Ramakrishna's life proves that it is possible for in the modern age also. Sri Ramakrishna was very near us. He was hardly 150 years, 175 years from us. 1886, he gave up this world to go for his eternal abode. So hardly, it is about one past 175, 180 years. He was here. 180 years is something like yesterday. All his teachings are very fresh. Many of the scenes, the places that he visited, they are even now, you get the mood. When you get into that, it is as if you are sitting there. If you get into the room in Dakshineshwar, you feel his presence as it were. So if you go to his birthplace, Kamarpukur, you feel he is there. They show you the place where he used to play, the Manik Raja, the mango grove. Even though it is there, it is kept as it is. And you have got the mango tree planted by him. Just even now it is yielding fruit. The fruits of mango are being given to you to eat, and they give you the saplings from there also. We have 2 saplings from that mango tree in Chennai Mutt. We have planted it and they are growing up, and perhaps in a few years they will give fruits. So everything is so fresh about Sri Ramakrishna. And Gauranga was a little 400 years earlier. So it was becoming a little stale. Again Sri Ramakrishna has brought back the Madhura Bhava to us in a living form, practical form. So like this, we are going to see so many other things, the great contributions of Sri Ramakrishna in our ensuing talks. Today, we shall close here itself. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampadhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. O Ramakrishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed a form out of compassion to the devotees, the incarnation of the Supreme Soul, and the adorable Lord of all, we salute thee, bowing our heads before you.